My boss humiliated me. What he didn't know was that I'd become his biggest competitor. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. Emily adjusted her discreet necklace as she studied her reflection in the elevator mirror. The grey tailored suit, meticulously chosen for her first day of work, perfectly conveyed the image she wanted to project: professional, capable, and above all, invisible. Her heart raced, not from nerves, but from the awareness of what she was about to begin. Every detail had been planned for months, from the job interview to how she would introduce herself to the team. The soft chime of the elevator announced her arrival on the 10th floor of the imposing Horizon Builders headquarters, one of the largest companies in the industry. The doors opened to a sleek environment of glass walls and a breathtaking city view. Emily took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and walked toward the reception desk. "Good morning, I'm Emily Thompson, the new administrative assistant." She introduced herself with a measured smile to the receptionist, who eyed her up and down with a look that mixed curiosity and mild disdain. "Oh yes, Richard has been notified. You can wait over there," the receptionist replied, gesturing toward a set of elegant chairs near the window. As she waited, Emily discreetly observed the office activity. Employees hurried past, some casting curious glances her way. Her palms were slightly damp, but not from insecurity. Every person who crossed her path was a piece of the puzzle she needed to decipher. "Emily Thompson?" A deep, authoritative voice cut through her thoughts. Richard Wilson, director of the administrative department, stood before her. Tall, impeccably dressed in an Italian suit, he radiated an aura of superiority he made sure to flaunt. "Yes, Mr. Wilson," Emily replied, rising with restrained grace. "Follow me," he ordered curtly, turning without waiting for a response. As they walked through the halls, Richard made a point of warmly greeting some employees while completely ignoring others. Emily mentally noted each interaction, every nuance of the power dynamics unfolding before her eyes. "Your station is here," Richard said, pointing to a simple desk strategically placed near his office. "I expect punctuality, organization, and above all discretion. We don't tolerate gossip or inappropriate behavior." "Yes, sir," Emily replied, keeping her gaze lowered as she settled into her new workspace. "Amanda will give you the passwords and basic instructions," he added, nodding toward a tired-looking young woman at the neighboring desk. "And Emily, we value excellence here. I expect you to measure up." As soon as Richard walked away, Amanda approached with a friendly smile, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "Don't worry too much about his manner. Richard can be intense sometimes, but you'll get used to it." Emily returned the smile, allowing herself a moment of apparent vulnerability. "Thank you, Amanda. I admit I'm a little nervous." The next few hours were filled with explanations about systems, processes, and company culture. Emily absorbed every detail with meticulous attention, taking precise notes and asking strategic questions that made her seem engaged but not overly ambitious. During lunch, Amanda invited her to eat at the building's cafe. Between bites of salad, Emily Thompson began weaving her web of information, listening intently to her colleagues' stories and frustrations. "Richard wasn't always like this," Amanda confided, lowering her voice. "Ever since he took over as director after the previous one retired, he's changed completely. Now he treats everyone like, well, you'll see." Emily nodded understandingly, storing every word like a valuable piece of the puzzle she was assembling. Her expression remained neutral, but inside her mind worked tirelessly, processing each new detail. Back at her desk, Emily began organizing her routine. Every file, every sticky note, every item was placed with deliberate precision. Occasionally, she'd glance up to observe the office dynamics, memorizing faces, behaviors, and unspoken hierarchies. At the end of the day, as she tidied her desk, to leave, Richard walked by carrying a stack of documents. "Emily, I need these reports organized and digitized by 8 a.m. tomorrow, no delays." "Yes, sir," she replied, accepting the stack with a calm smile, even though she knew it meant working late on her very first day. When the office was nearly empty, Emily remained at her desk, seemingly focused on the reports. In reality, every moment alone was precious for her observations. The small flaws in the security system, the unlocked computers, the careless hallway conversations, everything was recorded in her mind with surgical precision. Around 10 p.m., she was the last to leave. The night guard barely noticed her as she discreetly said goodbye. In the empty elevator, Emily finally allowed a small smile to form on her lips. Her first day had gone exactly as planned. No one suspected that behind the facade of a dedicated, unassuming employee was a woman with a far greater goal than simply carving out her place in the company. The following weeks at Horizon Builders unfolded like an intricate chess game, where Emily moved her pieces with caution and precision. Each morning brought new challenges and opportunities to map the territory she had chosen as her battleground. Richard Wilson didn't take long to show his true nature. During a departmental meeting, Emily presented a report he had urgently requested. "This is completely below standard," he interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Can't you even handle a basic task like this properly?" The other employees lowered their eyes, embarrassed by the situation. Emily, however, maintained her composed demeanor. "I apologize, Mr. Wilson. May I redo it following your specific guidelines?" "I don't know why I'm still surprised," he continued, ignoring her offer. "Maybe we should hire someone more qualified for the position." Amanda, sitting beside Emily, tried to intervene discreetly. "Richard, actually, this is the template you established last month." "Quiet!" he snapped, shooting Amanda a furious glare. "I don't care what was done before. I want this redone by the end of the day. And you, Emily, report to HR for a performance review." After the meeting, whispers in the hallways were inevitable. Emily pretended to absorb the blow, letting a few discreet tears escape as she retreated to the restroom. Amanda followed her, offering words of comfort. "Don't let him get to you," Amanda whispered, handing her a tissue. "He does this to everyone. Last week it was Claudia from finance. Before that it was John from accounting." Emily wiped her tears carefully, making sure not to smudge her makeup. "How does he get away with this behavior without anyone doing anything?" Amanda sighed heavily. "He has strong connections with the board. Besides, the company is in a delicate position with the potential merger with the Phoenix Group. No one wants to cause trouble." That information made Emily's eyes gleam imperceptibly. The merger with the Phoenix Group wasn't in the news yet. It was exactly the kind of information she needed. Back at her desk, Emily began working on the new report. As she typed, her mind processed every new detail. The merger explained a lot. The tension in the air, the closed-door meetings, the confidential documents constantly passing through Richard's desk. During lunch, Emily started sitting at the same table as Claudia, the finance employee who had also been humiliated by Richard. Through seemingly casual conversation, she learned that the merger was facing resistance from some minority shareholders. "The problem is, there's a lot that doesn't add up in the numbers," Claudia confided after gaining trust in Emily. "But who am I to question, right? I've already been through enough after that last meeting." Emily listened intently, offering just enough sympathy to keep the conversation flowing. Every new piece of information was a valuable clue in her puzzle. That night, when everyone had already left, Emily remained at her desk, seemingly focused on finishing the report Richard had demanded. In reality, her sharp eyes captured every movement, every detail of the empty office. She watched as the cleaning crew arrived, noting that one of them had unrestricted access to all the rooms. She mentally recorded the times when the security system ran automatic backups of the cameras. At home, Emily kept a special notebook where she recorded every relevant discovery in a code only she understood. That night, she added several new pages, including details about the potential merger and the vulnerabilities she was beginning to identify in the company's system. Her phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. "Sorry about what happened today. Richard went too far." Emily replied with a sad emoji and a thank you for the support, but her face showed no sadness. On the contrary, a satisfied smile formed on her lips as she reread her notes. The public humiliation that day hadn't been a setback in her plans. Quite the opposite, it was exactly what she'd hoped for. The more Richard underestimated her, the more he pushed her into the shadows, the more freedom she had to observe, learn, and plan. Lying in bed, Emily mentally reviewed every event of the day. The merger with the Phoenix Group was an unexpected variable, but one that could prove extremely useful for her purposes. The right people were already starting to trust her, seeing her as an ally against Richard's injustices. What no one realized was that Emily wasn't there to be another victim of the system. She was there to dismantle it piece by piece from the inside out, and Richard, in his arrogance, was unknowingly making her job easier. Emily Thompson watched the computer screen intently as she typed the monthly expense report. Her hands moved swiftly across the keyboard, but her eyes caught far more than just numbers. Through the reflection on the monitor, she could see Richard Wilson in his office gesturing nervously during a video call. "I don't care how, I need those documents approved by tomorrow." His voice cut through the glass walls, making several employees shrink at their desks. Amanda approached Emily's desk quietly. "He's been like this since he arrived. Seems there was an issue with the merger documents." Emily arched a brow slightly, feigning surprise. "But I thought everything was set with the Phoenix Group merger. Apparently, they found some inconsistencies in the financial reports," Amanda whispered, glancing around nervously. "Claudia told me the numbers don't match the previous records." At that moment, Richard stormed out of his office abruptly. "Emily, I need you to arrange an emergency meeting with the board for this afternoon. And no excuses, it has to be today." "Yes, sir," she replied, maintaining her usual composed demeanor. "I'll take care of it immediately." As she organized the meeting, Emily began noticing an interesting pattern. Certain people were deliberately excluded from important communications, while others, seemingly less relevant in the hierarchy, were always included. In particular, a young intern from the finance department, Luke, appeared to have access to information far beyond his position. During lunch, Emily decided to investigate this anomaly. She found Luke alone in the break room, preparing his instant coffee. "These merger reports are driving everyone crazy, huh?" she remarked casually while grabbing her water from the fridge. Luke nearly dropped his cup. "Ah yeah, lots of work," he replied evasively. "It must be tough for you handling all that documentation as an intern," she continued, her tone perfectly balanced between sympathy and admiration. The young man relaxed slightly. "Actually, I help Richard with some special analyses. He says I have a talent for numbers." Emily allowed a knowing smile to form on her lips. "That must be why he trusts you so much. Not every intern gets access to such important documents." Luke seemed to puff up with pride. "Richard knows how to recognize talent. He even taught me some special tricks to make the numbers work better." "Fascinating," Emily murmured, filing away every word. "You know, sometimes I feel a bit lost with all these spreadsheets. Maybe you could give me a few tips." In the following days, Emily carefully nurtured her friendship with Luke. The eager young intern, desperate to impress someone who finally recognized his worth, began opening up more and more. Without realizing it, he revealed crucial details about how Richard manipulated the company's numbers to make them more appealing for the merger. Meanwhile, Emily continued her flawless work as an administrative assistant. Every task was executed with precision, every deadline was met, every report was delivered in the exact format Richard demanded. Her efficiency, however, was strategically measured to keep her in the role of a competent but non-threatening employee. A particularly hectic afternoon, Richard called another emergency meeting. Emily, as always, arranged everything perfectly, but this time she accidentally sent the invitation to a board member who was usually kept out of these discussions. "How could you be so incompetent?" Richard exploded when he noticed the mistake. "Now Fernando will want to attend, and he's the one who asks the most inconvenient questions." "I'm sorry, sir," Emily replied, lowering her eyes in feigned submission. "Should I try to cancel the invitation?" "No, that would only draw more attention," he snapped, running his hands through his hair in obvious agitation. "Just prepare the room and make sure all the documents are organized exactly as I asked." Emily nodded obediently, but inside, her heart raced with satisfaction. Fernando was known for his sharp eye for financial details. His presence at the meeting would surely raise important questions. That night, in her apartment, Emily updated her coded notebook with the new information. Her conversations with Luke, Richard's reactions, the documents she had accidentally glimpsed, each piece of the puzzle was falling perfectly into place. Her phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. "Richard is freaking out about tomorrow's meeting. I've never seen him so nervous." Emily replied with a concerned emoji, but her eyes gleamed with anticipation. The chaos she had subtly planted was beginning to bear fruit. Richard, in his arrogance, would never suspect that his unassuming administrative assistant was methodically exposing every one of his vulnerabilities. Before bed, Emily reviewed her plan once more. Every move had been calculated with surgical precision. Every person had been carefully chosen to play their part, even unknowingly. And tomorrow, in the meeting with Fernando, another critical piece would be moved on her invisible chessboard. The meeting, now with Fernando's unexpected presence, had exactly the effect Emily had predicted. Sitting discreetly in a corner of the conference room, she watched the dynamics unfold like a meticulously planned chess match. "These third-quarter numbers seem overly optimistic," Fernando remarked, adjusting his glasses as he analyzed the spreadsheets projected on the screen. Especially given the real estate market downturn. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "As I explained earlier, we implemented new optimization strategies that—" "Optimization?" Fernando interrupted, his voice calm but incisive. "Or manipulation?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emily kept her eyes fixed on her tablet, seemingly focused on taking notes, but every muscle in her body was attuned to the reactions around her. "I suggest we conduct a full audit before proceeding with any negotiations with the Phoenix Group," declared Fernando, closing his briefcase with a decisive motion. "That would delay the entire process," protested Richard, his face beginning to flush red with nervousness. "We can't afford to waste time on unnecessary bureaucracy." Emily noticed the meaningful glance Luke exchanged with Richard at that moment. The young intern seemed just as nervous as his mentor. After the meeting, the office buzzed with whispered conversations. Emily remained at her desk, methodically organizing the meeting documents while absorbing every fragment of information floating around her. "Emily," Richard called, his voice tense, "I need you to compile all the financial reports from the last 18 months. And when I say all, I mean every single one." "Yes, sir," she replied, allowing a slight tremor of apprehension to seep into her voice. "Should I include the reports Luke usually prepares as well?" The seemingly innocent question made Richard narrow his eyes. "No, only the official reports." And Emily, absolute discretion about this. As she worked on organizing the documents, Emily implemented the next phase of her plan. With precise, calculated movements, she began creating small discrepancies in the files. Nothing large enough to be immediately noticed, but enough to raise questions during a thorough audit. Amanda approached her desk at the end of the day. "The mood is heavy, isn't it? I've never seen Richard so nervous." "He must be worried about the audit," Emily replied, keeping her tone neutral. "So much work to get everything in order." "Don't you think it's strange?" Amanda asked, lowering her voice. "I mean, if everything's in order, why so much tension?" Emily let out a small sigh. "Sometimes I wonder if we really know everything that goes on around here." The seed of doubt had been planted. In the following days, Emily watched as it began to sprout. Employees who had once blindly followed Richard's orders started asking questions. Documents that were once signed without scrutiny were now meticulously reviewed. In his office, Richard spent hours on tense phone calls, his voice occasionally rising in frustration. Luke, meanwhile, grew increasingly anxious, frequently double-checking his special spreadsheets. Emily continued her work with the same efficiency as always, but every action was part of a larger plan. Every document she organized, every email she sent, every conversation she joined, all of it gradually exposed the weaknesses in the system Richard had built. During lunch with Claudia from finance, Emily skillfully steered the conversation toward the suspicious numbers. "It must be hard for you dealing with reports that don't add up." Claudia hesitated for a moment, pushing food around her plate. "You know, ever since Fernando mentioned those discrepancies, I've started noticing other odd things, but Richard always has an explanation. Or maybe he just hopes no one will question it," Emily suggested softly. That evening in her apartment, Emily updated her encrypted journal with the latest observations. The cracks in Richard's system were becoming increasingly visible. The upcoming audit would be just the catalyst for something much bigger. Her phone buzzed with a message from Luke. "I need to talk to someone. It's getting hard to handle all this alone." Emily smiled as she read the message. The young intern was exactly where she needed him to be, pressured, scared, and looking for someone to trust. She replied with a supportive message, suggesting coffee the next morning. The breakfast with Luke turned out to be even more productive than Emily had planned. Seated in a discreet cafe far from the prying eyes of the office, the young intern finally began to crumble under the weight of his secrets. "I never wanted things to get this far," Luke confessed, his hands trembling slightly as he held his coffee cup. "At first it was just small adjustments to the numbers, you know. Richard said it was normal, that all companies did it." Emily maintained an expression of understanding and empathy, carefully choosing each word. "It must have been hard for you, having to deal with that pressure alone. The worst part is that I actually believed him," Luke continued, his voice choked. "He made me feel special, like I was the only one he could trust. But now, with this audit coming..." "Are you worried about what they might find?" Emily asked. Gently sliding a napkin toward him, Luke ran his hands over his face, visibly distressed. "It's not just the doctored numbers, Emily. There's more. Richard, he has a much bigger scheme going on. The merger with the Phoenix Group is just the tip of the iceberg." Emily felt her heart race, but kept her expression controlled. "What kind of scheme?" "He created shell companies," Luke whispered, glancing nervously around. "Several of them. The service contracts, the consulting fees, everything goes through these companies before reaching Horizon Builders. With every transaction, a portion of the money is siphoned off." That information was exactly what Emily needed, but she didn't show her satisfaction. Instead, she reached for Luke's hand across the table, offering comfort. "Do you have proof of this?" "I have everything saved," he confirmed, his voice shaking. "I started making backup copies of all the documents after Fernando mentioned the audit. I don't want to be the only one to fall when everything comes to light." Back at the office, Emily watched Richard with new eyes. He seemed more agitated than usual, making hushed phone calls and constantly checking his phone. "Emily!" he called abruptly. "I need you to cancel all my appointments this afternoon, and if anyone asks, tell them I'm in an off-site meeting." "Yes, sir," she replied, noticing how his hands trembled slightly as he shuffled papers on his desk. As soon as Richard left, Emily began executing the next phase of her plan. With precise movements, she accessed the company's backup system, an easy task, considering Richard had never bothered to change his default passwords. On her personal tablet, secured by multiple layers of encryption, Emily started compiling all the evidence she had gathered over the past few weeks: suspicious emails, doctored reports, records of bank transfers to shell companies. Each document was a piece of the puzzle she had been patiently assembling. Amanda passed by her desk late in the afternoon. "Richard disappeared all afternoon. Did something happen?" "Off-site meeting," Emily replied automatically, but allowed a hint of concern to color her voice. "Amanda, have you ever heard of a company called Phoenix Solutions Consulting?" Amanda's face scrunched in concentration. "I think I've seen that name on some contracts. Why?" "Nothing important," Emily said, turning her attention back to her computer. "Just organizing some documents." Later, alone in her apartment, Emily reviewed the information provided by Luke. The shell companies were only one part of the scheme. There was a much larger pattern of fraud and embezzlement, all carefully masked by manipulated financial reports. Her phone buzzed with a message from Luke. "I can't sleep. What if Richard finds out I talked to you?" Emily replied with reassuring words, but her mind was already several steps ahead. Luke was a crucial piece of her plan, but he was also the most vulnerable. She needed to protect him, not just out of strategic necessity, but because, surprisingly, she had developed a genuine sense of protectiveness toward the young intern. Sitting at her desk, Emily opened her personal notebook and began organizing all the evidence into a detailed dossier. Each document was carefully verified and catalogued. There could be no mistakes, not when she was this close to her goal. A new message lit up her phone, this time from an unknown number. "We know what you're doing. What's your next steps?" Emily stared at the message for a long moment, a calm smile forming on her lips. This was exactly the kind of reaction she had been expecting. Richard was starting to feel the noose tightening, and like any cornered predator, he was beginning to bare his teeth. The atmosphere at Horizon Builders' office had changed drastically over the past few weeks. What was once just veiled tension had now turned into a palpable sense of unease. Emily observed everything with meticulous attention, noting every subtle shift in the behavior of those around her. Richard spent the entire morning locked in his office, the blinds drawn, uncharacteristic behavior for someone who always made a point of being visible. Through the gaps, Emily could see his silhouette moving nervously, alternating between phone calls and typing on his computer. "Did you see the board's email?" Amanda asked, approaching Emily's desk with a worried expression. "It looks like the audit is starting next week." Emily nodded calmly, though her heart raced at the news. "I heard they're bringing in an external team." "The finance team is panicking," Amanda continued, lowering her voice. "Claudia told me some important documents just vanished from the system." At that moment, the door to Richard's office swung open abruptly. He emerged with a flushed face and a loose tie, a far cry from his usual impeccable executive demeanor. "Emily!" he called, his voice tense. "In my office now." Inside the office, Richard closed the door and drew the blinds completely, a gesture Emily didn't miss. She maintained her serene posture, though every muscle in her body was on high alert. "I want to know exactly what you've been doing outside your normal duties," he began, his tone threatening. "I've noticed your unusual interest in certain documents." Emily allowed a slight tremble in her voice, carefully calculated. "Sir, I'm just trying to do my job to the best of my ability." "Don't give me that," he snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "I know you've been talking to Luke, and coincidentally right after some critical files started having technical issues." "I really don't know what you're talking about," Emily replied, keeping her practiced expression of innocence. "Luke is just a co-worker." Richard circled the desk, stepping uncomfortably close. "Listen here, you little manipulator. I don't know what game you're playing, but if you think you can threaten me, you're dead wrong. I've crushed people, far more important than you." Emily let tears well up in her eyes, perfectly playing the role of a frightened employee. "Mr. Wilson, I would never—" "Enough," he interrupted. "You have until tomorrow to resign. Otherwise, I guarantee your professional life will be completely ruined. Do I make myself clear?" As soon as she left Richard's office, Emily let the tears fall freely, a necessary performance for the curious eyes following her. Amanda immediately rushed to comfort her. "What happened? What did he say?" He wants me to resign," Emily sobbed, her voice trembling just enough. "He said he'll destroy my career if I don't leave." The news spread quickly through the office. By the end of the day, Emily had received dozens of supportive messages from colleagues, many sharing their own stories of harassment and intimidation by Richard. At home, Emily finally allowed her real smile to surface. Richard's threat had been the perfect catalyst for the next phase of her plan. Now she had witnesses to his abusive behavior, along with a network of support that had naturally formed around her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Luke. "Heard what happened? We need to talk. I have something important to show you." Emily replied, confirming a meeting for the next day, but her mind was already several steps ahead. Richard's threat had been a crucial strategic mistake, exactly the kind of mistake she had hoped he would make under pressure. Sitting at her desk, Emily opened her laptop and began updating her dossier. Richard's threats, carefully recorded, on her phone during the meeting, were just another piece of the puzzle she had been patiently assembling. A new message arrived, this time from a private number. You don't know who you're dealing with. There's still time to back out. Emily saved the message along with the previous threats. Each attempt at intimidation was more evidence in her favor. Richard was exactly where she wanted him, cornered, paranoid, and making mistakes. The meeting with Luke took place at a small cafe 3 blocks from the office. The young intern seemed even more nervous than usual, his eyes constantly scanning the people around them. You won't believe what I found, he said, opening his backpack and pulling out a flash drive. After Richard threatened you yesterday, I spent the whole night digging through company files. Emily eyed the small device with controlled interest. Luke, you didn't have to take that kind of risk for me. It's not just for you, he replied, his voice trembling slightly. It's for all of us. Richard, he's not alone in this. Big players are involved, Emily, people from the board. Before Emily could respond, a familiar voice surprised her. Sorry, we're late. It was Claudia from the finance department, accompanied by Amanda. The two sat at the table, forming a small circle of trust. I thought we should all be part of this conversation, Luke explained, noticing Emily's questioning look. Each of us has a different piece of the puzzle. Claudia opened her tablet, sliding it discreetly across the table. Look at this. These are records of all the suspicious transactions from the last 2 years. The shell companies Richard created aren't just for siphoning money from Horizon builders. They're also used to launder money for other companies, Amanda added, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. And guess what? All those companies have ties to the Phoenix Group. Emily absorbed every piece of information with meticulous attention, her brain quickly adjusting her plans to accommodate these unexpected new allies. Why are you showing me all this? Because you're different, Luke answered. Since you arrived, you've been the only one who hasn't. Bowed to Richard. And now that he's trying to destroy you, we want to help, Claudia interrupted. Each of us has suffered from his manipulations, but alone, we never had the courage to do anything about it. Emily studied every face around the table. She saw fear in their eyes, yes, but also determination. A determination born from years of silent humiliation and injustice. What exactly are you proposing? She asked, keeping her voice neutral. Amanda leaned forward. The audit starts next week. If we combine all the evidence we have, we can finally expose the entire scheme. It's not that simple, Claudia warned. Richard has protection on the Tau board. We need to be very careful. Emily allowed a small smile to form on her lips. Maybe I can help with that. I have some personal information that might be useful. The group spent the next few hours sharing evidence and planning their next steps. Emily watched with satisfaction as each new piece of information fit perfectly into her original plan, now enriched with allies she hadn't expected to find. Back. At the office, the group dispersed naturally, each returning to their usual tasks. Emily noticed Richard watching her through the blinds of his office, his face a mask of poorly concealed suspicion. So, he asked as she passed his door, have you decided about your resignation request? Emily let her voice tremble slightly. I'm still thinking, sir. Don't think too much, he warned, his tone laced with threat. Some decisions need to be made, quickly. That night in her apartment, Emily organized the new information in her dossier. The evidence provided by her new allies complemented her own findings perfectly, painting a much broader picture than she had initially imagined. Her phone buzzed with messages from the newly formed group. Each of them expressed a mix of fear and hope, feelings Emily understood deeply, though for reasons different from what they imagined. Luke, are we sure we're doing the right thing? Amanda, we can't turn back now. Claudia, together, we're stronger. Emily replied to each message with carefully chosen words of encouragement. Her new allies were valuable pieces on her chessboard, but they were also people who, like her, had suffered at Richard's hands. As she prepared for bed, Emily reflected on how fate sometimes offers unexpected gifts. Her original plan had been a solitary one, designed to be executed in the shadows. Now she had allies, people willing to risk their careers for a common goal. The days leading up to the audit were marked by growing tension at Horizon Builders' office. Emily watched as Richard grew increasingly erratic, alternating between moments of barely contained fury and periods of artificial calm. "We need you in the meeting room," he announced curtly one morning, catching Emily off guard at her desk. "The audit team wants to ask some preliminary questions to all key employees." Emily noticed the malicious glint in his eyes when he emphasized key employees. It was a clear provocation, an attempt to remind her of her supposed insignificance in the company hierarchy. In the meeting room, Emily found not only the audit team but also Fernando and two other directors. Her heart raced slightly, but her expression remained composed. "Miss Thompson," began one of the auditors, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, "I understand you're responsible for organizing the administrative department's documents." "Yes, ma'am," Emily replied, keeping her voice calm and professional. "We've noticed some peculiarities in the files from recent months," the auditor continued, flipping through a folder. "Misfiled documents, reports with inconsistent numbers." Richard cleared his throat, interrupting. "As I mentioned earlier, we've had some issues with the system." "Actually," Emily said softly, "I can explain each of those inconsistencies." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily could feel Richard's furious gaze, but she kept her eyes fixed on the auditors. "We have a fairly efficient backup system," she continued. "Every version of the documents is recorded, including who made changes. And when." Fernando leaned forward, suddenly interested. "And you have access to these records?" "Naturally," Emily replied, allowing a faint smile to touch her lips. "It's part of my job to keep everything organized and transparent." After the meeting, Emily could sense the shift in the atmosphere. The auditors watched her with newfound interest while Richard could barely contain his rage. "In my office." "Now," he ordered as soon as the auditors left. But before Emily could follow him, Fernando intercepted her. "Miss Thompson, I'd like a private word with you later." Richard's face visibly paled. Emily nodded politely to Fernando before following her boss to his office. "You little viper," Richard hissed as soon as the door closed. "Do you think you can manipulate me? That you can play games with people far above your level?" "Mr. Wilson," Emily replied calmly, "I'm just doing my job. As you always say, transparency is key." The irony in her voice was subtle, but enough to make Richard tremble with anger. "You have no idea what you're stirring up. There's still time to back down, to do the right thing." "And what would the right thing be, sir?" Emily asked, her voice now laced with quiet defiance. Before Richard could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was Amanda, looking appropriately nervous. "Sorry to interrupt, but the audit team is requesting some urgent documents." Emily seized the opportunity to leave, feeling Richard's furious gaze burning into her back. In the hallway, she found Luke, waiting anxiously. "They asked for the special reports," he whispered, his face pale. "The ones I modified for Richard." "Don't worry," Emily reassured him. "We have backup copies of everything. You're not alone in this." For the rest of the day, Emily watched as tension spread through the office. Employees whispered in corners, exchanging worried glances. Richard remained locked in his office, receiving a series of stern-looking visitors. At her desk, Emily continued her work with her usual efficiency, but every move was calculated. Every document she sent to the auditors, every email she replied to, every spreadsheet she organized, it was all part of a meticulously planned choreography. By the end of the day, when most employees had already left, Fernando finally called her in for the promised conversation. "Impressive knowledge of the company's systems," he remarked, studying her with interest, "especially for someone who's been here relatively briefly." Emily allowed a touch of modesty to color her voice. "I learn quickly, sir, and I like to do my job to the best of my ability." "I can see that," Fernando replied, a glint of understanding in his eyes. "You know, Emily, sometimes the quietest people have the most to say." When Emily finally left the office that night, she knew the pieces of her plan were moving exactly as she had foreseen. The storm approaching would be devastating, but she was ready. After all, she had been the one to set it in motion from the beginning. The first week of auditing completely transformed the dynamics at Horizon Builders. The hallways, once filled with forced conversations and laughter, were now gripped by a tense silence, broken only by the sound of shuffling papers and keyboard clicks. Emily observed everything with meticulous attention as she organized a new stack of documents requested by the audit team. From her desk, she could see Richard through the half-open blinds of his office, gesturing nervously during yet another phone call. "The auditors are asking for the Phoenix Solutions consulting reports," Amanda whispered, approaching Emily's desk. "Richard is having a meltdown." Emily nodded discreetly, feigning concentration on her work. "Interesting. Just the reports that were accidentally misclassified in the system." Claudia joined, them carrying her own stack of documents. "You won't believe what I just found out. Those shell companies we uncovered, they all share the same tax address, and guess what? It's an abandoned building downtown." "How did you find that out?" Amanda asked, glancing nervously toward Richard's office. "Let's just say some important documents coincidentally appeared on my desk this morning," Claudia replied, giving Emily a meaningful look. At that moment, Luke emerged from Richard's office, his face pale and his hands slightly trembling. Emily discreetly gestured for him to come closer. "He's falling apart," Luke murmured, his voice barely audible. "He just got a call from the Phoenix Group. They're backing out of the merger." Emily allowed a small smile to form on her lips. "Seems our dear boss is losing his support one by one." "Emily!" Richard's voice thundered from his office. "I need those reports from Phoenix Solutions now." With deliberate calm, Emily pulled a folder from the stack on her desk and walked to his office. Richard was visibly disheveled, his tie loose and his hair tousled from nervously running his hands through it. "Here they are, sir," she said, placing the folder on his desk, "including the original versions before the alterations." Richard's face paled. "What alterations?" "Oh, I'm sorry," Emily replied with feigned innocence. "I thought you knew. After all, they were made using your login." Before Richard could respond, his intercom announced, "Mr. Wilson, the auditors are requesting your presence in the conference room immediately." "This isn't over," he hissed at Emily before rushing out. Back at her desk, Emily found a message from Fernando on her computer. "We need to talk. My office, end of day." The rest of the afternoon passed in a frantic pace. Emily watched as Richard nervously moved between his own office and the conference room, growing more and more unraveled. Employees whispered in corners, speculating about the reason for so many emergency meetings. As the workday neared its end, Emily made her way to Fernando's office on the upper floor. She found him studying a series of documents spread across his desk. "Have a seat, Emily," he said without looking up. "You know, I've spent the last few days trying to understand how we didn't see it sooner, how Richard managed to hide all this for so long." Emily kept her expression neutral. "Sometimes people only see what they want to see, sir." "True," Fernando agreed, finally looking at her. "But sometimes someone comes along who forces us to open our eyes. Someone who knows exactly where to look and why." The silence that followed was loaded with meaning. Emily held Fernando's gaze without flinching. "The auditors found enough irregularities to warrant a full investigation," he continued. "But something tells me you already knew that. Actually, something tells me you knew a lot more from the very beginning." Emily allowed a small smile to form on her lips. "Perhaps I'm just good at spotting patterns, Mr. Fernando." "Patterns," he repeated thoughtfully. "Like the pattern of a seemingly insignificant employee who manages to access exactly the right documents at exactly the right time." "Interesting coincidences happen every day," she replied smoothly. Fernando leaned back in his chair, studying her with newfound interest. "You know, Emily, I just got a very interesting call from the Phoenix Group. They want to reschedule negotiations, but with a new leadership team." Emily's smile widened slightly. The pieces were moving exactly as she had planned. Checkmate was near, and Richard hadn't even realized he was playing from the start. The next morning dawned with a different energy at Horizon Builders. Employees arrived early, whispering anxiously in the hallways. Something had changed, and everyone could feel it. Emily arrived at her usual time, wearing a stylish navy blue suit she had chosen especially for the day. As she passed the reception desk, she noticed the curious glances following her, no longer with disdain but with a mix of respect and admiration. "General meeting in 15 minutes, Fernando's secretary announced over the intercom. "Mandatory attendance for all employees in the main conference room." So Luke approached Emily's desk, his restless hands betraying his nervousness. "It's today, isn't it? Everything you said is going to happen." "Trust the process," she replied calmly, organizing some papers on her desk. "Just stay close to me during the meeting." Gradually, employees made their way to the conference room. Emily watched as Richard entered, his face a mask of false confidence. He was still trying to maintain his authoritative posture, but his eyes betrayed his growing panic. Fernando entered last, accompanied by the audit team and two executives Emily recognized from the Phoenix Group. The murmurs in the room ceased immediately. "Good morning, everyone," Fernando began, his deep voice filling the space. "As you may have noticed, the past few weeks have been quite intense here at Horizon Builders. Today we need to address some serious issues that have come to light during our audit." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but kept his chin raised in defiance. "Significant irregularities have been uncovered in our financial management," Fernando continued. "Irregularities that not only compromised our company, but also directly affected our employees and business partners." A murmur spread through the room. Emily noticed Amanda and Claudia exchanging meaningful glances. "However," Fernando went on, "thanks to the meticulous work of some dedicated employees, we were able to identify and document all these irregularities before they caused irreparable damage." Fernando's eyes met Emily's briefly before he continued. "In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the exceptional work of our administrative team, who not only spotted the inconsistencies but also kept impeccable records that were crucial to our investigation." Richard stood abruptly. "This is outrageous." "You can't." "Mr. Wilson," interrupted one of the Phoenix Group executives, "I suggest you remain seated. We have much to discuss regarding your activities over the past few years." Richard's face drained of all color. His eyes swept the room, lingering for a moment on Emily. For the first time, she let him see past her facade of the submissive employee. Her gaze met his with a force that made him flinch involuntarily. "As part of the necessary changes," Fernando continued, "we are implementing a complete restructuring of our management. The Phoenix Group maintains its interest in a partnership, but under new leadership." The next few minutes were a cascade of revelations. Fernando detailed how the shell companies had been uncovered, how the financial diversions had been documented, how every piece of the fraudulent scheme had been methodically exposed. Emily observed the reactions around her. Some employees looked shocked, while others nodded as if finally understanding patterns they had noticed for some time. Luke, beside her, trembled slightly, but remained steady. "To conclude," Fernando announced, "I'd like to introduce the person who will be pivotal in our restructuring. Emily Thompson, would you please join me up here?" A stunned silence filled the room as Emily rose gracefully and walked to the front. Her heart pounded, but her steps were firm and assured. "Miss Thompson has demonstrated not only an exceptional understanding of our systems and processes, but also unshakable integrity in the face of challenging circumstances," Fernando explained. "It is with great pleasure that I announce her promotion to Director of Compliance and Corporate Governance." The sound of applause filled the room, starting hesitantly and growing in intensity. Emily allowed a genuine smile to light up her face. As she watched her colleagues' reactions, Amanda and Claudia clapped with tears in their eyes, while Luke looked on the verge of fainting from relief. Richard, meanwhile, remained seated, his world visibly crumbling around him. His empire of manipulation and fear had been destroyed, not by a frontal assault, but by a silent, meticulous strategy, exactly the kind of strategy he would never expect from someone he considered insignificant. The weeks following the general meeting were marked by intense changes at Horizon Builders. Emily, now settled into her new office on the executive floor, dedicated herself to the monumental task of reorganizing the company's processes. "These are the new compliance procedures I've developed," she explained during her first meeting as director. The conference room, once the stage for so many humiliations, now carried a different atmosphere. Each department will have specific protocols for transparency and accountability. Amanda, recently promoted to administrative coordinator, flipped through the manual in admiration. "It's impressive how you've thought through every detail, Emily. A company's true strength lies in its integrity," Emily replied, her gaze sweeping the attentive faces around her. "Each of you will play a key role in this rebuilding." Luke, who had been retained as a junior financial analyst after cooperating with the investigations, timidly raised his hand. "What about employees who might have been unwittingly involved in the previous schemes?" Emily smiled gently. "We're implementing a whistleblower protection program. The past will serve only as a lesson, not as punishment for those who choose the path of transparency." After the meeting, Claudia stayed behind for a private conversation. "You know, Emily, something still puzzles me. How did you manage to gather all that evidence so perfectly?" "It was almost as if I knew exactly where to look," Emily completed, allowing a faint smile to appear on her lips. "Let's just say I had some familiarity with this kind of situation." Fernando chose that moment to walk into the room. "Ah, good. You're still here, Emily. The representatives from the Phoenix Group want to discuss the new terms of the merger. They're impressed with the changes we've implemented." In her new office, Emily gazed at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was different from the one at her old desk, but her attention to detail remained the same. On her desk, a newly framed photo showed a young woman smiling alongside a group of employees, her former team from a company she had worked at years ago. "That photo," Fernando remarked, having entered quietly, "it reminds me of something I read about a fraud allegation at a major corporation a few years back. A junior employee who exposed a similar scheme." Emily turned to face him. "Funny how certain stories repeat themselves, isn't it? Especially when someone knows exactly how they work," he replied, a glint of understanding in his eyes. "You didn't choose Horizon Builders by accident, did you?" "Let's just say I've developed a certain specialty in identifying and fixing corrupt systems," Emily admitted. "But this time I decided to do things differently. Instead of just exposing the problems, I'm helping rebuild something better." A knock at the door interrupted the conversation. It was Amanda, carrying a stack of documents. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should see this, Emily. These are the old contracts Richard's team used to manipulate. Some clients are coming back wanting to renegotiate under the new management." Emily took the documents, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Excellent. Let's show them how a company can be both profitable and ethical." In the hallway, employees walked with renewed energy in their steps. The fear that once hung in the air had been replaced by a sense of renewal. In the meeting rooms, teams enthusiastically discussed new projects. At the reception desk, a freshly installed plaque displayed the company's values: integrity, transparency, excellence. Emily watched it all with a mix of pride and determination. Her initial plan of exposure had turned into something bigger, an opportunity for real transformation. It wasn't enough to tear down the old system. She had to build something better, in its place. "Emily?" Luke called from the doorway. "The team's asking if you're joining happy hour tonight. They want to celebrate the approval of the new compliance procedures." She smiled, remembering how not long ago she had been seen as just another invisible employee. "Of course I'll go, Luke. After all, every achievement of this company is now an achievement for all of us." As she organized her documents to wrap up the day, Emily reflected on how her journey had evolved. What had begun as a personal mission for justice had turned into a project of collective renewal. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all, not just exposing what was wrong, but creating an opportunity for what was right to flourish. The impromptu happy hour on the building's rooftop turned into a genuine celebration. Employees from every department gathered, sharing stories and laughter. Something unthinkable just a few months ago, when fear and distrust dominated every interaction. Emily moved between groups, watching with satisfaction as the old hierarchical barriers had dissolved. Claudia chatted animatedly with the auditors, who were now part of the permanent team. Amanda coordinated a group discussing ideas for the company's new social projects. I still wonder how we didn't see it before, Fernando remarked as he approached with 2 glasses of sparkling wine. Richard's whole scheme was right in front of our eyes. Emily accepted the glass, allowing herself a moment of reflection. Sometimes, Fernando, it's easier not to see, especially when someone works hard to keep people blind. And you? What made you see so clearly from the start? Experience, she replied simply, her eyes scanning the city skyline. There are certain patterns that, once recognized, can't be ignored. Luke approached the group hesitantly, carrying a folder. Emily, sorry to interrupt, but I think you'll want to see this. These are the preliminary results from the audits at the other branches. Emily opened the folder, her eyes quickly skimming the numbers. A small smile formed on her lips. Looks like our work is just beginning. How so? Asked Amanda, who had joined the group. Richard's scheme wasn't limited to our unit, Emily explained. It was part of a larger network. But now we have the chance to expand our reforms across the entire corporation. Fernando nodded thoughtfully. And that's why the Phoenix Group is so eager to finalize the merger. They don't just want our assets, they want our new governance methodology. The conversation was interrupted by the clinking of glasses. Claudia had climbed onto a chair and was calling for everyone's attention. A toast, she announced, her voice full of emotion. Address to Emily, who showed us that it's possible to transform a company not just in numbers but in values. The sound of applause and clinking glasses filled the air. Emily looked at her colleagues, no, her team, with a sense of fulfillment that went beyond her initial revenge. Later, as the celebration began to wind down, Emily found a moment of solitude by the balcony. The sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Deep in thought? Asked Amanda, joining her. Reflective, corrected Emily. You know, when I first got here, I had a very specific goal in mind. But now, you've built something much bigger, Amanda finished. You didn't just expose the wrongdoing, you gave us hope that change is possible. Emily smiled, remembering her first week at the company, when she pretended to be just another invisible employee. Sometimes, Amanda, the best way to change a system isn't to tear it down completely, but to transform it from the inside out. What's next? Asked Luke, walking over with Claudia. Now, Emily replied, her determined gaze fixed on the horizon, we expand this model to other companies. Show them that integrity and success aren't mutually exclusive. Like a corporate governance consulting firm, suggested Fernando, who had joined the group. Emily nodded, a smile forming on her lips. Exactly, because there are plenty of other companies out there that need the same kind of transformation. And now we have the experience and the team to make it happen. The group fell silent for a moment, contemplating the possibilities ahead. The gentle night breeze carried promises of change, not just for Horizon builders, but for the entire corporate world. Did you know this would happen? Claudia asked softly. When you first arrived, did you imagine we'd come this far? Emily let her gaze sweep over each face around her, people who had started as pawns in her chess game and become true partners. Let's just say I had a plan. But you all made it better than I ever imagined. 3 months after the big reveal, Horizon Builders had become a model of corporate governance. The office, once dominated by fear and distrust, now buzzed with renewed energy and collaboration. Emily was in her office, reviewing a stack of requests from other companies interested in implementing her compliance model, when Amanda rushed in. You won't believe it, she exclaimed, waving a newspaper in her hands. Business Magazine wants to do a feature on our transformation. They're calling Horizon Builders the case that revolutionized corporate governance. Emily took the paper, a small smile forming as she read the headline. Interesting how a story of transformation always grabs attention. And that's not all, Amanda continued, sitting in the chair across from Emily's desk. 3 other construction companies reached out this morning. They want to implement our compliance system. Actually, it's 5 construction companies, Claudia corrected, entering the room with a folder of reports. And 2 developers. Looks like we've started a domino effect in the market. Emily leaned back in her chair, watching her 2 closest collaborators. Both had flourished over the past few months, taking on greater responsibilities in the company's new structure. "Maybe it's time we expand our scope," suggested Emily, picking up a pen and starting to take notes on her notepad. "Not just implementing compliance systems, but creating a consultancy specialized in corporate transformation." "What do you mean?" asked Amanda, leaning forward with interest. "Think about it," Emily explained. "What we did here wasn't just exposing irregularities and creating new procedures. We completely transformed the company's culture, and that's what other organizations are looking for." Luke knocked on the door, entering with his laptop. "Sorry to interrupt, but I think you'll want to see this. I just finished analyzing last quarter's results." The numbers projected on the screen were impressive. Productivity had increased by 40%, employee turnover had dropped to historic lows, and customer satisfaction had reached record levels. "And the most interesting part," Luke continued, now with a confidence that would have been unthinkable months ago, "is that our operational costs decreased. Transparency and ethics aren't just the right thing, they're profitable." Fernando chose that moment to join the impromptu meeting, and that's exactly why the Phoenix Group is so interested in expanding our partnership. They want to implement our model across all their subsidiaries. Emily stood up, walking to her office window. Below, the city stretched out like a giant chessboard, each building representing a potential opportunity for transformation. "You know what impresses me the most?" commented Claudia, flipping through the reports. "How each department found its own way to contribute to this change. It's like we awakened a potential that was always here. Because for the first time they truly feel part of something," Emily replied, turning back to the group. "They're no longer just pieces in a power game, they're agents of transformation." "What about Richard?" Amanda asked hesitantly. "I heard he's trying to re-enter the job market." Emily allowed a serene smile to form on her lips. "I'm sure he'll find his way, but the market has changed. There's no more room for old management methods based on fear and manipulation." "Speaking of changes," Fernando interjected, "the board has a proposal for you, Emily. They're thinking of creating a new division, specialized in corporate transformation, and they want you to lead it." The silence that followed was charged with anticipation. Emily looked at each face in the room, Amanda with her eager enthusiasm, Claudia, always analytical but now visibly excited, Luke, who had grown from a nervous intern into a confident professional. "A corporate transformation division," Emily repeated thoughtfully, "with the autonomy to implement large-scale changes." "Total autonomy," Fernando confirmed. "The board is convinced this is the future of the market, and they want Horizon Builders to lead this movement." Emily turned, her gaze to the city once more. When she had first arrived at that company, her goal was to expose a corrupt system. Now she had the opportunity to transform not just one company, but potentially an entire industry. The board's proposal to create a new corporate transformation division quickly became reality. In a matter of weeks, Emily and her team occupied an entire floor of the building, specially adapted for their new purpose. "It's incredible how everything changed so fast," Amanda remarked as she led a group of visitors through the new space. 6 months ago, we were just an ordinary administrative department. Now we're a benchmark in corporate governance." The tour ended in the new meeting room, where Emily was presenting the transformation program to executives from a major construction company. "What we offer isn't just a set of procedures," she explained, her voice filled with conviction. "It's a complete shift in mindset, a transformation that starts with people and reflects in processes." Claudia, now serving as process coordinator, added, "Our results show that companies implementing the full program see an average 45% improvement in their performance metrics." After the presentation, Emily found a quiet moment in her office. The once bare walls now displayed framed company values and certifications for excellence in corporate governance. Luke knocked on the door, carrying his ever-present laptop. "Emily, I finished analyzing the Silver & Silver developers case. The pattern is exactly the same as what we found here." "Let me guess," Emily smiled. "Power concentration, lack of transparency in financial processes, and a culture of fear that discourages whistleblowing?" "Exactly," Luke confirmed. "But now we have something we didn't before, a proven transformation method." Emily took the report, studying the numbers carefully. And the most interesting part, Luke, is how each case teaches us something new. Every company has its unique aspects, but the patterns of toxic behavior are always similar. Fernando entered the room with more news. The Phoenix Group is impressed with the results. They want to expand the program to all their companies in Latin America. And they're not the only ones, Claudia added, having just arrived. I received 3 new requests just this morning. It seems the market has finally understood that ethics and profitability can and should go hand in hand. Emily stood up, walking over to the board where she had outlined her strategic plan. You know, what makes me happiest? Seeing how every person who goes through our transformation becomes a potential agent of change. How so? Amanda asked, joining the group. Look at yourselves, Emily replied, turning to her team. Amanda, you were an assistant who was afraid to speak up. Today you lead cultural transformation projects. Claudia, who used to question numbers in silence, now teaches other companies how to build transparent systems. And Luke went from an unwilling accomplice to a fraud detection specialist. Fernando finished, smiling at the young analyst. Exactly, Emily agreed. And that's what makes our work so powerful. We're not just changing systems, we're empowering people to be the protagonists of change. The sound of applause interrupted the conversation. At the office door, a group of executives who had attended the earlier presentation watched the scene with admiration. Impressive, remarked one of the executives, stepping forward. Now I understand why everyone talks about the Emily Thompson effect. It's not just about compliance and governance. It's about awakening the transformative potential in every person. Emily smiled, remembering her arrival at the company when she pretended to be just another invisible employee. The real power of transformation has always been in the people. Sometimes they just need someone to believe in their potential. What about the toughest cases? Asked another executive. Those companies where resistance to change is strongest. Those are precisely the most interesting cases, Emily replied, a special gleam in her eyes. Because the greater the resistance, the greater the potential for transformation. It's like pressure. When it finally finds a release valve, it generates an incredible energy for change. The group continued discussing strategies and sharing experiences until late afternoon. When everyone said their goodbyes, Emily remained in her office, watching the sunset through the panoramic windows. On her desk, a photo caught her attention, her and her team on the day of the new division's inauguration. In each of their eyes shone the same determination she had felt years ago when she decided she needed to change the system from within. The auditorium at Horizon Builders was completely packed for the first corporate governance and business transformation seminar. Executives, managers, and professionals from various industries gathered to learn about the methodology that had revolutionized the market. Emily observed the backstage activity, adjusting the final details of her presentation. Amanda coordinated the reception team, while Claudia finalized the organization of the materials to be distributed. I never imagined we'd come this far, Luke commented, double-checking the presentation slides. From an administrative department to a center of excellence in corporate transformation. It's because we created something bigger than ourselves, Emily replied, smiling at her young protégé. Every person who went through our transformation became a catalyst for change. Fernando appeared in a hurry. Emily, there's someone who wants to speak with you before the lecture. I think you'll be surprised. In the VIP room, Emily found an elegant middle-aged woman who seemed strangely familiar. Hello, Emily, the woman said, standing up. I'm Helen Johnson, former director of Vanguard Enterprises, the one you exposed 3 years ago. Emily felt her heart beat a little faster, but maintained her composure. Ms. Johnson, I didn't expect to see you here. I imagine not, Helen smiled. I came because I needed to see it with my own eyes. When I heard what you'd done here at Horizon Builders, I was intrigued. Your approach, it's different from what happened at Vanguard. The circumstances were different, Emily replied carefully. Yes, they were, agreed Helen. There you exposed the scheme and left. Here you stayed to rebuild, and you know what? You were right both times. Emily observed the woman with curiosity. How so? Vanguard needed to be exposed. The system was so corrupt there was no saving it, Helen explained. But here you proved that it's possible to transform a company from the inside out. And that's why I'm here. I want to learn from you. Before Emily could respond, Amanda appeared at the door. Sorry to interrupt, but it's time. The auditorium is packed. On stage, Emily looked out at the diverse audience. Eager, attentive faces awaited her words. Among them, she noticed Helen seated in the front row. Corporate transformation isn't just about changing processes or implementing new systems, Emily began. It's about recognizing the potential for change that exists in every person, in every department, in every company. As she spoke, Emily shared not just data and methodologies, but real stories of transformation. She told them about Amanda, who found her voice and her leadership, about Luke, who turned his technical knowledge into a tool for positive change, about Claudia, who channeled her frustration into the strength to innovate. The true power of transformation, she continued, lies in understanding that every person plays a fundamental role in building a more ethical and efficient corporate environment. In the audience, executives scribbled notes furiously. Some nodded in recognition, others whispered among themselves, clearly identifying patterns from their own companies. But most importantly, Emily emphasized, nearing the end of her presentation, it's about understanding that transformation isn't a destination, it's a continuous journey. Every day brings new opportunities to improve, to grow, to make a difference. After the talk during the networking cocktail hour, Emily was approached by numerous executives interested in implementing her program. But it was a young intern from a mid-sized company who caught her attention. Your work inspired me not to be afraid of questioning questionable practices at my company, the young woman said, her eyes shining with determination. How did you start? How did you know you could make a difference? Emily smiled, recognizing in that young woman the same fire that once drove her. I started by understanding that real change begins with small, courageous actions. Every ethical choice, every constructive question, every act of integrity counts. Fernando approached with another surprising update. The National Corporate Governance Council wants you to lead a special committee to develop new compliance guidelines for the construction sector. And that's not all, Claudia added, joining the group. 3 universities want to include our case study in their business administration curricula. Emily watched the movement in the hall, people sharing experiences, exchanging ideas, building connections. Her work had become something much bigger than herself. It was no longer just about exposing problems or fixing systems. It was about inspiring a new generation of leaders committed to ethical and sustainable transformation. A year after the seminar that marked the consolidation of the corporate transformation program, the meeting room at Horizon Builders was once again buzzing with energy. This time, it was a special occasion, the inauguration of the Training Center for Governance and Business Ethics. It's incredible how far we've come, Amanda remarked, organizing folders for the program's first students. We started out wanting to change one company, and now we're training agents of transformation for the entire market. Emily Thompson watched the activity from her office window. In the training center's courtyard, professionals from various companies began arriving for the first day of classes. Among them, she recognized familiar faces, people who had gone through similar struggles to those she had faced at the start of her journey. Emily, Claudia called, entering with a folder of reports. The numbers from last quarter are in. The impact of our program on participating companies has exceeded all expectations. Luke, now the Innovation in Compliance Coordinator, joined them with his laptop. And that's not all. Companies that implemented our governance model are reporting an average 60% increase in employee satisfaction. Because we're not just implementing rules, Emily replied, turning to her team. We're changing entire cultures. We're proving it's possible to build corporate environments based on trust and integrity. Fernando entered the room with more news. The Ministry of Economy wants to use our program as a model for a new corporate governance regulatory framework. And there's more, Amanda added, checking her tablet. 3 multinationals have requested our consulting services to implement the program in their Latin American branches. Emily smiled, remembering her first week at Horizon Builders when she pretended to be just another invisible employee. Now her transformation method was changing not just companies, but an entire market. "You know what makes me proudest?" she asked, looking at her team. "Seeing how each of you has grown, how you've turned your own experiences into tools for change." "And we're not the only ones," Claudia added. "Every company that goes through our program develops its own transformation agents. It's like a positive chain reaction." Just then, a young intern knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but the students are arriving for the program's first class." The training center had been carefully designed to be more than a traditional corporate school. It was a space for transformation, where professionals from different levels and sectors could learn, share experiences, and develop the skills to drive change in their own organizations. "Before we begin," Emily said, standing before the first cohort, "I want you to understand something fundamental. You're not just here to learn about compliance and governance. You're here to become catalysts for change." The room was filled with attentive professionals. Among them, Emily recognized executives from large corporations, mid-level managers, and even a few interns, all united by the same desire for transformation. "Each of you has a story," she continued. "Each of you has faced situations where you had to choose between the easy path and the right one. What we're going to do here is turn those experiences into tools for positive change." During the inaugural class, Emily shared not just methodologies and processes, but most importantly, real stories of transformation. She spoke about how small actions can trigger significant changes, and how the courage to question can inspire others to do the same. "The true power of transformation," she explained, "doesn't lie in grand dramatic gestures. It's in the small daily choices, the consistency of our actions, the courage to do what's right even when no one is watching." By the end of the EE day, as she watched the students leave excited and inspired, Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her work had evolved from a personal mission into a corporate transformation movement. "It's like we've created a new profession," Amanda remarked while organizing the day's materials. "Corporate transformation agents." "Actually," Emily replied, "we're just awakening something that has always existed within every professional, the ability to make a difference, to drive positive change, to build more ethical and efficient environments." Fernando approached with a smile. "You know, Emily, when you first arrived here as a simple administrative assistant, I never imagined you'd be leading a revolution in corporate governance." Emily smiled, remembering her journey. The biggest transformations often start in the most unlikely places. What matters is having the courage to take the first step and the persistence to keep moving forward. On a particularly busy morning at the training center, Emily received an unexpected visit. A young executive from Vanguard Enterprises, the very company where her corporate transformation journey had begun years earlier. "My name is Sofia Martinez," the visitor introduced herself. "I was hired to lead Vanguard's restructuring after that whole transformation process you started." Emily gestured to a chair, studying the young executive with interest. "And how has that journey been?" "Challenging," Sophia admitted. "But inspiring too. We used your case at Horizon Builders as a model. In fact, that's why I'm here. We want to implement your full transformation program." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Emily. The company she had helped expose years ago was now seeking her guidance to rebuild. "You know what's most interesting?" Sophia continued. "We tracked down some of the former employees who left during the crisis. Many of them want to come back, to help with the rebuilding. They say you inspired them to never give up fighting for a more ethical corporate environment." Amanda, who had quietly entered the room, smiled upon hearing this. "That's exactly what happened here. People don't just want a job, they want to be part of something meaningful. And that's why our program works," Claudia added, joining the conversation. "We don't impose changes. We create an environment where people feel empowered to be agents of transformation." Luke walked into the room with his laptop, as usual. "Emily, we need to update you on the pilot project in public companies. The preliminary results are impressive." "See?" Emily smiled at Sophia. Transformation is an ongoing process. Each new case teaches us something different, helps us evolve our methodology. Fernando, who was passing by the door, stopped when he heard the conversation. And speaking of evolution, the Council approved the creation of the Institute of Corporate Governance and Transformation. Emily's eyes lit up at the news. The Institute was a long-held dream. A space dedicated not just to training professionals, but also to research and developing new corporate transformation methodologies. "It's amazing how everything connects," Sophia remarked, observing the team's interaction. "When I read about your work here, I expected to find a rigid system of rules and procedures, but it's so much more than that, isn't it?" "It's about people," Emily replied. "It always has been. Every procedure we create, every system we implement, has one ultimate goal: to empower people to make a difference in their workplaces." The morning continued with Sophia observing activities at the Training Center for Governance and Business Ethics. She attended a corporate ethics class, participated in a governance workshop, and spoke with students implementing changes in their own companies. "It's like a web," she commented during lunch. "Everyone who comes here carries a bit of that transformative energy and spreads it in their work environment." "Exactly," Amanda agreed. "And the most beautiful part is seeing how each person finds their own way to drive change." Emily watched the movement in the center's cafeteria. Executives ate alongside interns, sharing experiences and ideas. The hierarchical barriers so common in corporate environments simply didn't exist here. "You know what impresses me the most?" Claudia asked, joining them for lunch. "How each new student brings a different perspective, enriching our program even further." Luke arrived with more news. The Horizon Builders case was just added to Harvard Business School's curriculum. They want to do a full study on our transformation methodology. "And that's not all," Fernando added. 3 Latin American countries have already expressed interest in adapting our model for their public governance programs. Emily smiled, remembering her first week at Horizon Builders. Who could have imagined that her personal mission for exposure and justice would turn into a global movement for corporate transformation? "It's funny," she said, looking at Sophia. "When I started at Vanguard, I thought exposing problems was enough. Today I understand that real transformation happens when we stay to rebuild, to create something new and better. And that's why I'm here," Sophia replied. "Vanguard is ready for its own transformation journey, and we want to learn from those who truly understand that change isn't about destroying the old, but about building a better future." The auditorium of the newly inaugurated Institute of Corporate Governance and Transformation was packed for the graduation ceremony of the first advanced program class. Emily watched with pride as she looked at the graduates' faces, each with their own unique story of transformation to tell. "It's impressive how each class brings something new," Amanda commented, helping organize the certificates. "Every student who comes through here ends up contributing to the evolution of the program itself." Among the graduates were executives from large corporations, managers of family businesses, public servants, and even some social entrepreneurs, all united by the same purpose: to transform their workplaces into more ethical and efficient environments. "Emily," called Claudia, approaching with a tablet, "the National Corporate Governance Survey just came out. Our model was ranked as a benchmark for organizational transformation." Luke, who had taken over as head of the research division at the Institute, added, "And the most interesting part is the multiplier effect. Every company that implements our program ends up influencing its entire supply chain and partners." Fernando entered the auditorium with another update. "The World Bank wants to use our methodology as the foundation for a global corporate governance program in developing countries." Emily smiled, remembering how it all began. Who would have thought a simple fact-finding mission would turn into something so much bigger? The graduation ceremony wasn't just a celebration of completing the course. It was a milestone of personal and professional transformation for every participant. One by one, the graduates shared their stories of change. "When I first arrived here," said a multinational executive, "I thought governance was just about rules and procedures. Now I understand it's about creating a culture of integrity that perpetuates naturally." In my family business, shared another graduate, we always accepted certain practices as normal. The program helped us realize we can be profitable without compromising our values. Sophia, who had become one of the program's most dedicated students, was also among the graduates. Vanguard's transformation is just beginning, she declared in her speech, but we're already seeing the fruits. Employees who were once afraid to speak up are now leading innovation projects. During the reception after the ceremony, Emily moved between groups, listening to stories and sharing experiences. Every conversation reinforced her belief that real transformation happens through people. "You know what impresses me the most?" Amanda remarked, observing the interactions among the graduates. "How each person found their own way to be an agent of change. We're not creating copies, we're inspiring authentic leaders." And that's exactly what makes the program so effective, Claudia added. "We don't impose a one-size-fits-all model. We provide tools for everyone to build their own path of transformation." Luke approached with his laptop, showing the latest impact data from the program. Companies that implemented our methodology didn't just improve their governance metrics. They also saw better financial results. "Because integrity and success aren't mutually exclusive," Emily smiled. "In fact, one fuels the other." Fernando, who was speaking with some international representatives, called Emily over to share news. They want to create a global network of institutes like ours, a kind of international alliance for corporate transformation. The idea of international expansion was exciting, but Emily knew the real impact still lay in the individual stories of transformation. In every person who discovered their power to make a difference, in every professional who chose the path of integrity. "The most beautiful part," she commented to her gathered team, "is seeing how everyone who passes through here becomes a point of light in their organization, and those points of light multiply, creating an ever-growing network of positive change." Amanda, Claudia, and Luke nodded, each of them living proof of that transformation. From a team initially brought together by circumstance, they had become true agents of change, inspiring others with their own journeys of growth. And to think it all started with one seemingly invisible employee at a company in need of change, Fernando reflected. Emily smiled, observing the surroundings. The institute had become much more than a training center. It was a beacon of transformation, a meeting point for people who believed in the power of positive change. 5 years had passed since Emily first walked into Horizon Builders. The building was the same, but everything inside had changed. The Institute of Corporate Governance and Transformation now occupied 3 entire floors, and its influence extended far beyond the building's walls. "We need more space," Amanda remarked, organizing the schedule for the upcoming international conference. "Registrations for next semester's program have already exceeded our maximum capacity." Emily gazed at the city through her office window. Below, a new group of students arrived for another day of classes. Among them, she recognized executives from around the world, all eager to learn how to implement positive transformations in their organizations. "It's incredible how the program has grown," Claudia said, entering the room with the latest reports. "We now have partners in 15 countries, and the list keeps growing." Luke, who had just returned from a conference at Harvard where he presented Horizon Builders' case, joined the group. "You know what impressed the academics the most? How we created a model that's both structured and flexible, allowing adaptations for different cultures and realities. Because we understand that transformation isn't about imposing a single model," Emily replied, turning to her team. "It's about awakening the potential for change that exists in every organization, in every person." Fernando entered the room with a broad smile. "I just came from a meeting with the Ministry of Economy. They want to implement our program in all state-owned companies." "And that's not all," Amanda added, checking her tablet. 3 international universities want to create master's programs based on our methodology." Emily smiled, remembering her first week as an administrative assistant. Who could have imagined that her personal mission for transparency and justice would turn into a global movement for corporate transformation? "Do you all remember Richard?" Claudia suddenly asked. "I heard he's giving lectures on business ethics now." "The irony of life," Luke commented. He finally understood that the market has changed. There's no room left for old management practices based on fear and manipulation. At that moment, Sophia entered the room. After successfully leading Vanguard Enterprises' transformation, she had become one of the Institute's top consultants. "Emily, you need to see this," she said, handing over a business magazine. On the cover, a bold headline read, "The Silent Revolution: How a Former Administrative Assistant Transformed the Corporate Market." "I'm still amazed by the reach of our work," Emily admitted, flipping through the magazine. "Every transformation story I read, every piece of feedback we receive, shows we're on the right path." "It's because we're not just teaching compliance and governance," Amanda noted. "We're showing that it's possible to build ethical and profitable companies at the same time. And more than that," Claudia added, "we're proving that real transformation starts with real people, willing to make a difference in their workplaces." Luke stepped closer to the window, watching the arriving students. "Every person who walks through those doors has the potential to change their reality. It's like a positive chain reaction. A reaction that started with a seemingly invisible employee," Fernando smiled, "who decided she could make a difference." Emily stood up and walked over to the bookshelf, where she kept important mementos from her journey. Among photos and certificates was a simple administrative assistant badge, her first disguise at Horizon Builders. "Do you know what I've learned all these years?" she asked, turning to her team. "True transformation doesn't happen through grand, dramatic gestures. It happens through small, consistent actions, through daily choices rooted in solid values. And through people willing to lead by example," Sophia added. "Like you did, Emily." The sound of lively voices echoed from the hallway, another group preparing to begin their transformation journey. Emily smiled, thinking of how many stories of change were yet to unfold. "The most beautiful part," she said, "is seeing how each person finds their own way to be an agent of transformation. We're not creating followers, we're inspiring leaders." Amanda, Claudia, Luke, and Fernando nodded, each of them living proof of that philosophy. What had once been a small team, brought together by circumstance, had become mentors and inspirations for a new generation of professionals committed to ethical and sustainable transformation. On a special morning, Emily arrived early at the Institute. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a sight she used to admire in her early days as an administrative assistant when she'd arrive before everyone else to observe and plan. The building was quiet, but soon it would be full of life. It was the inauguration day of the first International Center for Corporate Transformation, a project that would expand the reach of their work even further. "I thought I'd find you." "Here," Amanda said, entering the room with 2 cups of coffee. "You always come early on important days." "Old habits," Emily smiled, accepting the coffee. "I still like to have a moment to reflect before the day begins." Claudia arrived shortly after, carrying a folder with the latest global reports. "The numbers are impressive. Over 1,000 companies transformed, more than 50,000 professionals directly impacted by the program." "And this is just the beginning," Luke added, entering with his ever-present laptop. "Requests to implement the program keep pouring in. Companies worldwide want to be part of this transformation." Fernando joined the group, bringing the final details for the inauguration ceremony. "The auditorium is already packed. We have representatives from over 30 countries." Emily looked at her team, no, her family, with pride. Each of them had grown so much over the years, finding their own voice and their own way to contribute to corporate transformation. "You know what moves me the most?" she asked, walking to the window. "Seeing how every person who goes through our program becomes an agent of change in their own reality. Like that intern from the last group," Amanda recalled. "She implemented an ethics program at her company and is already inspiring others to do the same." "Or that traditional executive who thought governance was just bureaucracy," Claudia added. "Now he's one of the biggest advocates for ethical transformation in the market." Sophia entered the room carrying a surprise, a framed copy of the first article ever published about Emily's work at Horizon Builders. "I thought this moment deserved a special reminder." Emily took the frame, studying the headline, the silent revolution of corporate governance. It felt like so long ago, and yet it was as if everything had happened just yesterday. It's incredible how everything connects, she reflected. Every choice we made, every person who crossed our path, every challenge we faced, it all contributed to bringing us here. The sound of voices began to fill the building, guests arriving for the inauguration ceremony. Among them, Emily recognized familiar faces, former students who had become mentors, executives who had transformed their companies, young professionals eager to make a difference. "It's time," announced Fernando. "Everyone is waiting for you." Emily. Before heading to the auditorium, Emily paused for a moment, looking at her team. "You all know this isn't about me, right? It's about all of us. About every person who believes they can make a difference. And about every person who will yet discover they can," Amanda added with a smile. On the stage of the packed auditorium, Emily observed the diverse audience. People from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds, all united by the same purpose: to transform the corporate world into a more ethical, efficient, and humane place. "When I began this journey," she started her speech, "I was just an employee who believed I could make a difference. Today, I look at each of you and see thousands of agents of change, ready to create positive shifts in your own environments." Her words flowed naturally, filled with experience and truth. Emily spoke about transformation, about courage, about the importance of small, consistent actions. But above all, she spoke about hope, the hope for a corporate world where ethics and success go hand in hand. "This international center isn't just a building," she concluded. "It's a symbol that transformation is possible. It's a reminder that each of us has the power to make a difference. And more than anything, it's a promise for the future, a future where integrity and excellence aren't exceptions, but the rule." The applause that followed was more than a celebration. It was a collective commitment to transformation. Emily looked at her team, at the smiling faces of Amanda, Claudia, Luke, Fernando, and Sophia,